Barbecue is more than food. It's ritual, it's memory, it's identity. But what if the story most Americans think they know about barbecue is incomplete? Today, I'm joined by Adrian Miller, James Beard Award winning author and one of the foremost scholars of African American foodways, to talk about his book, Black Smoke. It's a sweeping history of barbecue in the United States that puts Black pitmasters, cooks, and culinary traditions back at the center of the story where they've always belonged. From the plantation South to presidential inaugurations, from roadside pits to global competitions, we trace how barbecue became an American obsession and how Black labor, skill, and innovation built it. This is a conversation about smoke, yeah, but it's also about erasure, ownership, legacy, and who gets remembered. I'm Jason Herbert, and this is A Reckoning. My name is Jason Herbert. I'm a Southerner who lives in the West. I'm a historian, an outdoorsman, and a movie buff. I like finding new answers to old questions, and this is A Reckoning. Dude, I'm going to pretend that we haven't been talking for a minute. Somebody said the other day, they were like, how come you always say that you've been talking? It makes us feel like we've been missing out. And I'm like, you have been missing out on so many things now. So I'm excited. Dude, do you realize you're an OG podcast person for me? You were like the fourth pod we ever did on this podcast. Like you, me and Mark Johnson, we did Soul Food back in the day. Like it was like the fourth or fifth pod, and I was trying to figure out what we were doing. And you were guys like, yeah, I'll take a chance on you. So thank you. Mark's coming on soon to do his book, his bacon book. So I'm excited to see that. This will be fun. We get to talk about your work today. I have a question. You and I had lunch recently, and I didn't ask you this. How does a guy from Denver get into barbecue?
So fortunately, I have two Southern parents. He's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Adrian Miller, late a decade ago. And then my father, Hyman Miller Sr., is from Helena, Arkansas. So they separately came to Denver in the 1960s, met at a church, and for me, the rest is history. But in an unlikely place like Denver and its suburbs, they stayed true to their Southern food tradition roots, of which barbecue was one. But growing up, we only had barbecue during the summer months. I mean, basically, it was Memorial Day to Labor Day. That was our barbecue. We might have take some ribs out of the freezer that were cooked during the summer, and then have like a little. But that pretty much, it was just the summer months.
Was it just this summer because it gets cold? Well, not this year, but like it gets cold in the winter, and like barbecue's an outdoor kind of thing. Like, I mean, this is pre-electric smokers and all that kind of stuff. Like you had to go tend the pit back in the day.
Yeah, I think it was just a function of weather, because if you look at barbecue season in the South, it really actually goes until late in the fall, because one, it's not as cold, and two, it was cold enough to keep a lot of the flies away. So I think that's why prime barbecue season was in the fall. Because man, I don't know if you've ever been to a picnic in the South in the height of summer, but it's like a biblical plague of flies, dude.
You know,
I was just we did a family reunion in Helena, and we had a man. I mean, seriously, I've never seen that many flies in my life. It was like, did you ever see that movie, The Amityville Horror?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Okay, so you remember the scene when the priest is trying to, like, and all those? Yeah, it was like that, dude.
Oh, totally. Right. Like I grew up, like I'm rocking, in honor of our discussion today, I'm rocking the Homeland t-shirt today. I'm rocking a t-shirt that says Kentucky on it for you guys listening and stuff. But like I grew up in Kentucky, and then Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, which is home of like Crawfish Festival and stuff like that. You know, a different vibe. I think you and I were talking about that the other day, but also Western Tennessee and Clarksville, Tennessee, and then moved here from Florida, which has this actually, people don't think about Florida as a barbecue place, but there's actually a cool thing that goes on over there. But bugs, yeah, we got them throughout the South, right? And you're purposely standing in the smoke when you're barbecuing to get out of the way of the mosquitoes and God knows what else, right? It's like it's preventative. And I've thought, Adrian, for the longest time, my son, right, my 18-year-old son got into this thing a few years ago where he's buying all these colognes, Adrian, and he's spritzing so much on him. I'm like, one spray, one, I can smell you from here, right? But I've often thought the greatest cologne, the greatest perfume a woman could ever wear, for me, would be that of a barbecue scent. I would just come across the room and be like, "Hi, welcome, hi," So it's just that smoke.
Really, that's interesting because one of my best dating stories involves that.
Tell me.
So I had a friend visiting from out of town last minute, and he wanted to go out to lunch. I said, "Okay, let's go to my favorite barbecue place." And they were this is in downtown Denver. And they, for whatever reason, they were cleaning the grill. So there was like a smoke hanging on the ceiling when we walked in. I didn't think anything about it. We have our lunch, part ways. I go back to my office, which I was sharing with someone. And as soon as I walk in my office, my office mate says, "Dude, you smell like bacon," which is typically not a problem. But I had this highly anticipated date that night, first date, on somebody I met online. And I desperately tried to get some Febreze. I had a job where I could not leave and go home and bathe and change clothes. That was not a possibility. So I didn't want homegirl to think I had a hygiene problem. So I canceled the date. Of course, when I fessed up and told her why I canceled, she said, "Oh, I love the smell of bacon."
That's awful.
Now, you would think this is true love, right? So we did go on a few more dates. But then I noticed that I was the one doing most of the work. So I just pulled back a little bit just to see if she let a brother know she's thinking about him. And she's definitely playing hard to get because I haven't heard from her in 13 years.
Yeah, well, it's long game, I think. It's distance makes the heart grow fonder, I think. You have to do that.
One, right?
You know what? My girlfriend made me wait 48 years to meet her. Was the craziest thing. I was like, now, yeah, she's coming over in like an hour and a half. But first 48 years of my life, not around. It's kind of a jerk move on her part, I thought, but it's working now. On this podcast, we often do a lot of books that are like kind of coming out, people on the promo tour and stuff like that. That's not the case with this because what I am centering on is this beautiful thing right here, your book. I need to tell you my story about this book for people listening in. It's in the intro, Black Smoke, African Americans and the United States of Barbecue, which, by the way, Adrian, just an awesome name for this book.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have to buy books anymore because the podcast and stuff, but I bought this thing immediately when I saw it. And Adrian, I have gifted this book, I think 6 times now. Like I keep giving it to people. I love this book so much. And I was thinking around the other day, I'm like, I need to have Adrian. I want to talk about this book because I think it's amazing. It's Black History Month as we're recording this, but like really it's Barbecue History Month every single month of the year in my book. So I want to talk about this because this is quite literally like one of my favorite books I have in my possession. I meant to bring it to you when we had lunch the other day and I couldn't find it. It was downstairs. But it's so cool because you've got this history. You've got these really cool vignettes that kind of pop in. You tell me these stories of like these pitmasters and stuff like that. And then there's recipes and stuff. And I made ribs last night.
Nice.
So there's so much here. And I guess let's start here with this because I really want to get into the history of barbecue and specifically black barbecue, Adrian, as we kind of have this conversation. You talk a lot about food. You're all over the place. I see you, not just barbecue, but all kinds of stuff. Your handle is Soul Food Scholar. We've talked about this. What are the misconceptions people have about barbecue when you talk to them?
I think the biggest one is people really don't know the history. And so they think it's something that was created in the American South, primarily by white men. And, that it's this thing that's kind of existed for, a while, but it was kind of working class food. But now in the last couple of decades, it's become chef driven. And so I think most of the people who are coming to barbecue now, they really don't understand what John T. Edge, the famous food writer, used this word, but the vernacular type of cooking that barbecue was. And so right now, I think there's a conventional wisdom that barbecue is cooked low and slow. So that means low temperature, low heat, low temperature for a long period of time away from the heat source. So that's indirect cooking. that you have to use the highest quality meat. Even though the lesser cuts are used, you use the highest quality of the lesser cuts. If that makes sense. Minimal seasoning, salt and pepper. That's a chef's conception, and that they should have no sauce. And this is not what barbecue was for most people for a couple of 100 years. Barbecue was almost the opposite. It was definitely cooking for a long period of time over low heat, but it was directly over the fire source, which was a pit. And people were doing whole animal cooking. This whole lesser cuts thing, that's a 20th century kind of development. And then when it comes to the seasoning, I mean, I know a lot of people that love their marinade or their rub. And then this whole idea of sauce, that is just ridiculous. At least in the African American culture, barbecue, it's understood that you should know how to cook the meat. And so the sauce is really where you show your chops and develop your signature taste. So,
all right, we're gonna get to this. Okay, let's Adrian, let's start at the beginning. Where does barbecue come from? I know these stories, but like, where do we get this notion of barbacoa, and where does this, as we know barbecue today? You talk about it in the book. You really give us the long history of Q.
Yeah. So the earliest written accounts is a recap of Columbus's second journey to the Americas. It was written a few decades after that. But the story goes, Columbus and his crew, they come to what we would now call the Dominican Republic. They're approaching the shoreline. They see this contraption of basically a raised platform of green sticks. There's stuff on top of the platform latticed with sticks, and there's a slow fire. No human beings around. So Columbus and his crew, they come on shore, and as a sign of things to come, they help themselves to all the food without asking. Later, the indigenous people show up. There's astonishment. There's conversation. And so the word barbecue, as we get it, is a game of historical telephone. So Spanish, because remember, Columbus's crew was Spanish, he was Italian. Barbacoa was an approximation of what the indigenous people called that raised platform of sticks, which was something you saw throughout the Americas. Used to dry tobacco, all kinds of things. And so later, that barbacoa becomes barbecue in English. And then barbecue becomes applied not only to that raised platform of sticks, but also to the cooking process itself and the food. So that's why barbecue is a noun, a verb, and an adjective.
Yeah, it's doing a lot of work, and I think when you and I saw each other, I think one of the things that scares me most in the world is when I go to a restaurant and I see the word barbecue and grill, because I'm just like, pick a side here, man. You can't do both here. I get worried because the term like we're throwing a barbecue and it's a charcoal grill, and I'm like, that's not what we're doing here today. What were the native people smoking? Like, because Columbus and the boys are bringing pork with them from the old world. So what's running around? Is it deer? Is rabbit? What are folks cooking?
Yeah, so they're cooking venison. They're cooking fish, vegetables. The one thing that was interesting about this Columbus story is that they had iguanas on there, which was a delicacy for the indigenous people. That was the one thing the Europeans just would not eat. And so the indigenous people were actually grateful. They're like, okay, they didn't take the delicacy. So yeah, all kinds of things they were cooking on there. But yeah, mainly like venison. They weren't doing whole animal cooking, so it was pieces. But if they were doing whole animal, it would be fish.
Do we get the sense that like there were other types of barbecue or some variation of this being done like in Africa or Europe? Like this seems like such a natural thing to do, Adrian, especially, you set this up, you can set it and forget it. You get a good fire going and then you walk off. Why is this such a big deal for Europeans as they're discovering this? Nobody's cooking like this back in the old country?
Yeah, it just doesn't look like, at least the Europeans that we know who wrote down their accounts, they talk about it as if it's something they haven't seen before. So, barbecue is a very bellicose topic, right? People want to fight about it, especially the origins. And so I've had people say, no, barbecue's from Europe, no, barbecue's from West Africa. And others just say, hey, if you cook meat over fire, it's barbecue. So barbecue's worldwide. But I just push back on all of that. It just looks like it was something that indigenous people were doing in the technique, right? But we see other types of cooking in the Americas at the same time. So you've got the earth oven, which is digging a pit in the ground, having a mixture of rocks and wood set aflame, and then layering vegetation meat. Now that earth oven is something you see around the world.
Sure.
Most people think of it as the luau when they have Kahlua pig or something like that, but you see that in the middle. You see that around the world. Another thing you see is using pierced sticks, and so they would put morsels of meat on the stick, stick it in the ground, and then the weight of the meat would bend it toward the fire, and that was another way you could cook and leave and come back. And then another one was the rotating spit, which Europeans were familiar with. Indigenous people didn't have metallurgy at that time, or metallurgy, however you say it. But they were using wood to do something. So my feeling is that what we call barbecue was essentially not that raised platform technique in the islands, but indigenous people in Virginia were doing a shallow pit. So it was almost a modification of the earth oven, which they would either they would put rocks and wood in there, set it to flame, let it burn down. They would either put strips of meat on the combination of rocks and wood, or they would lay green sticks across it, creating kind of a gridiron, and put the meat on top of that. I think that that's the precursor to barbecue. And later, Europeans and enslaved Africans then start bringing their meat cooking traditions, and there's a collaborative process, and it leads us to Southern good barbecue.
Yeah, I guess that's where I really kind of want to go next, because you hinted at it earlier. I mean, there's certainly I want to talk about this a little bit later on about barbecue along racial traditions or like ethnicities and stuff like that. But the crux of this book is really about barbecue and in Black traditions. And I'm kind of wondering, where does that start to begin? Is that during the time of slavery, or when do you start to see this historically?
Yeah, so it looks like, first of all, Europeans were enslaving Native Americans, which is a story I didn't know until I got into this book.
Right.
But you can come to this knowledge when you get it. And so because Native American slavery just didn't work on the scale that Europeans wanted it to, they transitioned to African slavery. And so you see a transference of culinary knowledge where this cooking of method by indigenous people then gets, Africans get forced to make it. So by the time you're getting to the late 17th century, early 18th century, you're starting to see more and more Africans doing this. And certainly 100 years later, by the time you get to the 19th century, African Americans are barbecue's go-to cooks. But because this has not been well documented, it was hard to just show the through line between indigenous people and Black people. So it's more, this is plausible what happened. But fortunately, in my book, I found a couple of people who are African American who described barbecue as cooking the Indian way. And there was another guy named Henry Papa Miller, no relation, guy in Kansas, who said, no, my grandfather was indigenous, and he taught my father how to cook this way, and that led to me. So that's one family's account of just kind of the through line there.
Do we, as Black families are starting to barbecue food here in the Americas, is there an adaptation on the part of white folk towards barbecue as well? Is this a racial? Is there a racial thing? It's kind of like, are you seeing that like one ethnicity is kind of taking this food in first, or is everybody kind of saying, yeah, this is good, I'm down for this?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and it's one that I want to answer, but I just don't have a good answer for it. And again, this is just because it wasn't well documented. Because every account we get is just of European descended people eating this stuff. So we don't get a real sense until maybe 50, 100 years later that, African heritage people are eating this food as well. So it's hard to tell just because we're getting a very myopic perspective on what's going on.
Sure.
I would like to think, though, that everybody was grubbing on this food because it's delicious.
Yeah. Right now, we're about to see the release of this new series on Amazon Prime called The Grey House. I'm kind of helping to try to promote this. We've got a bunch of pods on it. We're doing a bunch of stuff. But certainly, one of the things that you talk about is, the power of Black cooks in white spaces, right? And I was thinking about this a little bit earlier about Black kitchens and white houses and all of these kinds of things. And I'm kind of wondering about the power dynamics as far as about like plantation cooks. They're often enslaved men who are working in, with extraordinary skill in these spaces. So how does barbecue kind of function within those societies? Do you see anything like that during that, antebellum era?
Yeah, so barbecue emerges as the kind of go-to celebration food for much of the year in the South, because early barbecue demanded community because it was whole animal cooking. And so it wasn't something that you would just make for a small party of people. Usually it had a crowd going. And so
Mhm.
almost any civic occasion involved barbecue, mainly because if you had enough land, enough area, and you had enough labor, this in case free enslaved labor, and you had enough resources in terms of meat and other kind of food, you could feed thousands of people. And that's not something you could do with something like fried chicken, right? Because logistically, to fry chicken for 1,000 people would be just a logistical nightmare.
Mhm.
But you could do that with barbecue. So I think that's why barbecue becomes the preferred party food of the late 1700s, early 1800s. Not only just in the South, you start to see barbecue popping up in other parts of the country too to mark any kind of civic occasion.
Yeah,
so it's
there's
really interesting.
well, there seems to be a real tie between like barbecue and politics, right? Like, in my home state of Kentucky, there's this big thing where the parties come together and there's all these debates and it's over a big barbecue. And this isn't like a 19th century thing. This is all the way up until today. Are you still seeing, like, you've written about the White House and so does barbecue make its way into the White House as well?
It does, but it's almost a 180 from what it was 200 years
Really?
ago.
Tell me.
Yeah, when political barbecues happened a couple centuries ago, it was something that the candidates and wealthy people would form a host committee, and they would pay for everything. So barbecue was free. In politics today, barbecue is a corporate fundraiser. Nobody's doing it for free. You got to pay for that plate to roll up in there. So complete 180 from what it was. And I wish we could get back to that ethos of, just as a matter of civic pride, whatever. You hosted anybody, everybody's welcome. We're gonna put on a good spread for you. Come hear about my politics and vote for me.
I was thinking about who would be eating barbecue in the White House, and all I could really think was about like Lyndon Baines Johnson being down from Texas. I could only imagine that he would be throwing down, and maybe Jimmy Carter. I can assume being from Georgia, but like I'm kind of wondering who else were the big presidential Q eaters.
Oh yeah. So you've got George Washington. Actually, when he was starting out in politics, he hosted a barbecue. He funded it and everything. So he was one. Uh, when you get to later, you've got like Theodore Roosevelt in terms of documented barbecue. You've got Theodore Roosevelt. You've got Franklin Roosevelt. He invited a famous black barbecue guy, Adam Scott from North Carolina, to come to the White House to make it. But yeah, it's more in recent years. So definitely LBJ. He even had a barbecue state dinner for the president of Mexico. That's, so as far as we know, that's the only state dinner on record, and he had it at his ranch in Texas. And there's pictures of it and everything. It's really cool. You're absolutely right. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter actually had some dudes from Georgia come up and do a pit barbecue on the South Lawn. So they dug a pit on the South Lawn of the White House and did some whole pig, barbecue, whole hog barbecue, which is interesting. And then more recently, you've got the Texans, right? So George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, definitely big barbecue guys. Obama was a big barbecue guy. I haven't heard that about President Trump, so I don't know. And Biden, I didn't hear that much about Biden. Biden was more of a kind of classic meat and potatoes and spaghetti, kind of like classic kind of working class favorites. That's what you feel. So yeah, so barbecue's been well represented in presidential history.
Yeah, but you talk about this as like in these ideas of these state dinners, and I'm trying to think about like what foods really represent America, right? There's the cheeseburger, but I really think it's got to be barbecue in my mind's eye. Like if there's anything American about food, right? Because all these cultures in the United States have some variation of it, and I'm wondering why it doesn't take place in more like state dinners because you talk about this in the book. It takes an incredible amount of technique. But is there a classist thing going on, or is barbecue not fancy enough to be to be shared on the world stage?
Not yet, but the way that barbecue is going, I think it's only a matter of time before it shows up in more fine dining concepts. And it's already actually happening right now. So I was just talking to an audience last night, and I was telling them, hey, for a long time, barbecue was just working class food.
Yeah.
And if there was barbecue in a fine dining restaurant, it maybe was there just during the summer, maybe just during June or July as a special. But now more and more fine dining chefs believe that they have to do barbecue in order to show their cooking chops. And so I just think, and more and more barbecue joints are getting James Beard Awards and Michelin nods and stuff like that. So I just think it's a matter of time before you see barbecue in more and more fine dining spaces, because it's just trending that way right now.
Well, can I ask you about another space that we might see barbecue in, which are churches? Can we talk about the connections between the church, between Protestant churches largely, and barbecue? Like, what are you seeing? Because this seems to me across the racial spread, but I definitely want to hear about Black churches and barbecue here.
Yeah, so this is something that goes back a couple centuries as well. I would say that there were two leaders that figured out that barbecue could be used to their to their ends effectively, and that was preachers and politicians. So we've already talked about the barbecue part, but the preachers figured out, hey, yeah, if I say some barbecue, I might get a lot of people to listen to me. And so the earliest iteration was actually these things called camp meetings. So these would be multi-day events that took place in a rural area, where essentially, and this is during the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening of Christianity in this country. And so this is what basically you would have preachers setting up and they would preach for hours. Now, this is mind-boggling to the people today, right? Because they don't want church to last longer than an hour. But imagine going to a place, listening to preachers for hours, and then after that, they would have an immense spread, and it became a festive thing. So you got that going on. But then you also have barbecue associated with churches. For enslaved people, Sunday was one of the few days where they didn't have a lot of supervision from their enslaver. And so they had more free time to do things, and cooking barbecue was one of those things. So there's this association with barbecue and church that really happens in the Black community. And it's not exclusive, right? Because like you just said, it crosses all lines in terms of having a barbecue as either a social occasion or a fundraiser. But those roots are really deep in the Black church. And even to this day, a lot of Black churches make barbecue a feature of the social calendar. And then another interesting thing is you have a lot of Black preachers who run barbecue restaurants, and you have a lot of Black church-run barbecue restaurants, which I think is really fascinating.
Can we talk a little bit about the migration of barbecue throughout the United States? You and I tend to think about this, like early on, we're like, how does a guy from Denver come to, because we don't think about the Rockies as a barbecue place. We tend to think about this as a southern space. But have you seen, Adrian, like this spread of Q? I mean, we'll get into the regionalism debates here in a minute, but like, where does barbecue go and how? Is it throughout the United States now? Are there barbecue vacuums, Adrian, in the United States that must be filled?
I don't think so anymore. Right after emancipation, the earliest ambassadors for barbecue were African Americans, who were often put on a train or a stagecoach or a boat to bring a taste of Southern barbecue, authentic Southern barbecue, to a place. So newspapers in the last half of the 19th century are just full of these accounts of Black people showing up and doing barbecue. And interestingly enough, sometimes the Black person would just stay in that place. They're like, well, I don't want to go back to the racist South. And there's still racism here, but at least I have a chance to have a good life. And so they kickstart the barbecue scene in all these places, which is just really, really fascinating. But no, man, barbecue is hot. It's not only, there's no barbecue vacuum in the United States. There are only a few left in the world. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to travel to other countries, and barbecue is all over the place.
When I ask you about barbecue itself, is there a particular meat that comes to mind or a particular cut?
Well, yeah, for me, the touchstone is pork spare ribs. That's my thing. That's what I judge any barbecue place on. And that's because that's what I grew up on. When we did barbecues at my place where I grew up, my parents and my mom was actually the chief barbecuer. So in Black culture, women are all over the place. So sisters have been grilling it for themselves for a long time. So I always bristle at the fact that barbecue was always portrayed as dude food, because that's not the story in the Black community. So my mom was the main cook. So, a typical barbecue for us was slabs of pork spare ribs, chicken, and then we call it hot links, but a coarsely ground spicy sausage. So those were usually the meats for us, and then we had all these glorious side dishes as well.
All right, what's the appropriate side dish for barbecue in the Miller household?
Oh, potato salad for sure, and coleslaw, without raisins. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I said that. And then we would have macaroni salad. Those were kind of our core salads that we would have that, and then baked beans.
Oh, I'm definitely down for the baked beans, but I am anti mayonnaise. I think that I've been well documented on this. So I remember as a kid, I would be like, coleslaw and potato salads were for old people at reunions. I couldn't do it. But that's fine. It's more Q for me. And I would just go directly from barbecue to banana pudding when we would do the things. So my grandmother would throw that down.
Nice.
But I do want to talk to you about the regionalism, because that's when I first got on Twitter and started making a name as a scholar, we got in this immediate soda war back in 2018 that quickly turned into like a barbecue war, because everyone's got takes on regionalism. Can we talk a little bit about the differences in regions? And I don't even want to list the regions, because I'd really like to hear you talk about the regions that you think are important and kind of talk about the differences between them.
Yeah, so when I think about regionalism, I think, understandably, I think about the meats involved, the proteins, and then the sauce. In some regions, I think about the sides, because there are some regions that have unique side dishes that you just don't see anywhere else. But I think there's a fairly standardized menu. So I think of Virginia, Eastern North Carolina, and parts of South Carolina as the whole hog tradition. You see it show up later in Western Tennessee, but that's. And I always tease people from Virginia. I'm just like, why did you let North Carolina steal all of your glory?
All the thunder.
Yeah, because that's where you guys are the ones where it started, in my opinion. But nobody thinks about Virginia for barbecue, which is really interesting. And then you've got that early vinegar-based sauce with some spices, without tomato, because at that time people thought tomatoes were poison, right? Part of the nightshade family. But then you get to Western North Carolina, you've got a different tradition, because you've got German immigrants who are used to cooking shoulder, and then you've got gradual acceptance of tomato, so there's a little bit of tomato in that sauce. And then you go down to South Carolina, you've got a whole hog tradition there. They do pig pickings. You've got all kinds of sauces. People talk about the mustard sauce. I got to tell you, man, I am a big fan of the mustard sauces. I wasn't 5 years ago.
Same. I converted. Yeah, you give me mustard sauce on like pulled pork with like a pickle and some onion for some reason. This is how I want that. But go on.
Yeah. I think there's a deep South kind of tradition, which is pretty much like pork, shoulder, chopped usually, and then barbecue spare ribs and chicken. With soul food or southern side dishes. So instead of the standard coleslaw, potato salad, baked beans, you could have greens, mac and cheese, that kind of thing. Then you get to a place like Memphis, which is, I think, barbecue's funky town, because you just got so much stuff going on there. I love Memphis because they specialize in pork spare ribs. People talk about wet or dry seasoning. That's just a or wet or dry rubs, and I think it's just a matter of seasoning. I don't think that's a style per se, but I love that. I love the pork sandwich. Bread, chopped pork, some coleslaw, and then to top it off, I think I just love that sandwich. That's one of the platonic forms of sandwiches for me. And then there's other interesting stuff. Like you start to get to a place like St. Louis. They've got not only the spare ribs and the pork shoulder and things like that, but they've got snoots, which is a pig snout.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the very edge of the pig snout, and they smoke it, and it's interesting. It's got texture because of the cartilage and stuff, so it's a little bit chewy, but then it's kind of crispy as well. It's not for everybody, but I like it.
Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, and then you keep going up the river there. You get to a place like Chicago, where you've got, I think there is a defined Chicago style. The chicken that is fried and then dipped in barbecue sauce. That's the only place that I've seen that.
I've never even heard of this.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you get this?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I didn't think about. I think it was Chicago like Polish food, not like barbecue. Go on, tell me about this.
Oh no, they've got their own style, man. That dipped fried chicken you can get at Harold's, most of the black owned barbecue places. You've got rib tips. That's that they argue that's where it started. This guy named Leon Finney would go to the stockyards, wait for them to close, and then dumpster dive and get the tips out because the rib tips are created because a spare rib is ovular, right? And then they're trying to create that St. Louis rectangular rack, so they're trimming off. And then they've got the hot link sausage, and then all of this is served on a bed of fries, and sometimes the entire thing is drenched with sauce.
Oh my God! All right, okay. I'll die if I go to Chicago.
Yeah, and then I think there's a Midwest style that's pretty similar that you see in Detroit and Cleveland. More and more pork shoulder, but definitely ribs and the sausage. Then you get a place like Texas, has multiple styles. In the eastern part of the state, more black influence, and also Creole influence, given the proximity to Louisiana. So you're going to have your pork, your brisket, and sausage. They call it boudin, but it's spelled differently.
Boudin, yeah, sure.
Yeah, they spell it with an A. So you're familiar with that as a nice former Louisiana resident. But in eastern Texas, you're going to have Creole side dishes. So they'll have dirty rice with their barbecue. Yeah. But it's going to be a messier presentation than the Instagrammable, perfectly manicured barbecue you see in Central Texas. So usually sauced up and other things. South Texas, you've got a strong Latino influence. So you've got cabrito, goat, you've got cabeza, cow heads, usually cooked in an earth oven approach, with kind of Spanish, or not Spanish, but Mexican side dishes. And then Central Texas barbecue, that's the hit barbecue right now.
Sure.
Brisket, and this is influenced by the Central European immigrants that opened up meat markets, started selling the stuff they couldn't sell to local ranch hands and oil workers. And then you get to my favorite, which is Kansas City.
Oh God, you killed me. All right, go on. We'll fight about this in a minute. Go. Tell me why you're wrong.
Close to Denver. I love Kansas City because of spare ribs, brisket. They're the place where burnt ends were created. You can get mutton, you can get ham. All of this is on a bed of fries and white bread. I like the thicker tomato-based sauce, although that's not the only sauce in Kansas City. I mean, people often say Kansas City, thick, sweet sauce. There are multiple sauces there. And all these other places I described, I forgot to talk about the sauce. It's usually a different ratio of tomato and vinegar. So it's usually like, some are more vinegary, like in the deep south. And then as you get north, they start to become more tomatoey. But there's still a lot of vinegar presence there. So those are major styles to me. I mean, you've got some other styles on the West Coast, like you've got Santa Maria tri-tip, that has distinctive side dishes like the little taquinta. I forgot, I don't speak Spanish, so there's a type of bean you got to have with it. And then people talk about salmon in the Pacific Northwest, although to me that's not a well-defined style, but something that's delicious. So that's what I think about when I think about kind of major barbecue style.
I was just up in Seattle and I'm going to Vancouver next month, and there's that whole salmon, and they're definitely smoking it, but it's not quite. But I also dig it, Adrian, because it's like barbecue adjacent, or and so forth. Like I definitely dig overall the cooking and stuff like that, and the idea. Like I'll just throw down on meats and smoke. But I want to ask you about something here that you hinted at a little bit earlier, which is, we're talking about black barbecue spaces here. And there really seems to be at some point in time in the 20th century where like white people kind of wrested that story away from black folk in popular, certainly not in black communities, but, in popular media. And we see the white barbecue chef or the celebrity guy, Myron Nixon or whoever, like, what happens here? Like, how do white people start taking barbecue as a white Adrian? How do the white people start taking barbecue notoriety and making it their own? Like, what happens here?
Yeah. So barbecue gets culturally appropriated twice.
Okay.
So it happened the first time in the 19th century, where essentially the indigenous history with barbecue was written out.
Right.
So it becomes a white and black thing. So that's the first time. But then, for decades, the go-to cooks were black people. Now, there were certainly white men more getting involved in barbecue by the time you get to the late 1900s, early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean late 1800s, early 1900s. But then what happens in the late 1980s, early 1990s is there was an intense interest in regional American foods. And so people started asking two questions. What is barbecue and where do I get the good stuff? And unfortunately, the media at that time, rather than showing a diverse world of barbecue, they tended to gravitate towards four types of white men. I call them the four archetypal barbecue white dudes. So you have the Bubba type, the rural, working class, ball cap, overalls. And then you've got the competition cooks, which the guys with syringes, Bluetooths, setups, all that kind of stuff. And then you get the hipster. And the hipster is a key change in barbecue because that is when barbecue starts being considered a craft.
Is this Aaron Franklin?
Yeah. So Aaron Franklin is like the poster child for this, but there were plenty of other people like this. And so you start to get a shift away from looking at barbecue as working class food to a craft. And then once it becomes a craft, a lot of white men start getting into it. And then the last thing we talked about earlier is fine dining chefs are now in barbecue way more than they were before. So with those folks getting most of the media attention in the 90s, people who were new to barbecue, who didn't know about the indigenous and the African influenced past, were like, oh, okay, this is barbecue. These are the guys who make it. I'm going to support them, get their barbecue. And that continues to grow momentum until you get to the 2000s with the rise of the competition shows. Unfortunately, even on those competition shows, you don't see many black people at all. In fact, one year, I remember the Food Network had a competition show, and there was not one black person on a national barbecue competition show. And then the other thing I'll give you is get on the Food Network. Paula Deen had an hour-long show on Southern barbecue. 60 minutes later, the credits are rolling out. I said to myself, there was not one black person on this show about barbecue in the South.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought to myself, well, maybe I got it twisted. Maybe it was Paula Deen's Scandinavian barbecue, sponsored by Alabama White Sauce.
We're going to talk about Alabama White Sauce in a second.
Yeah. So these media representations really reoriented the emphasis on barbecue and moved it away from a black aesthetic, which it had for a very, very long time. It no longer has that.
Do you think that social media is helping to change that a little bit?
A little bit. I would say in recent years, especially since I wrote my book, I think things are getting better. Like on a lot of these network shows, including the Food Network, they are better about being diverse. And I think social media helps because now we're in a great time where more and more people can get information out. And so we're seeing more influencers pay attention to black restaurants and, and emphatically say, hey, this is a black-owned restaurant. This is how they make their stuff, that kind of thing.
Right. When you see these barbecue competitions, you talk to restaurant owners, when you talk to people who just barbecue. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. You said your mom was the person who did the barbecuing in your family. That's both surprising and not surprising to me. Because like in my family growing up, like the cooking was always the woman's space. I wasn't allowed. I wanted to learn how to cook, Adrian. Like, and my grandmother was like, you're a guy. You don't get to be in here unless you're grilling, right? And it's like the outdoors, fire, masculine. That's when it's okay, right?
Yeah.
How does barbecue work along gender lines in black communities?
So in black communities, there is no gender line.
Okay.
Anybody can step to the grill. If a number of black-owned restaurants are named after women, and the black male pitmaster would say, my mom is the one who taught me how to do this, or the recipes. So we don't have that at all. And one of the coolest stories in my book, Black Smoke, is I found the story of a woman in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, who was enslaved, and she was doing barbecue in the 1840s. And she not only was doing barbecue. She was in charge of the barbecue. She was called the barbecue superintendent. And so she was telling dudes what to do in the 1840s.
Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm just blank. I can't believe it. I'm blanking on her name right now. So if it comes to me, I'll say it. But that was one of the best stories of my book, is finding her.
Well, you've got a lot of really cool vignettes in the book. Can you talk a little? This doesn't even need to come out of the book per se, because your experience talking about foodways in the United States is continued on well after this book was published. But I'm kind of like wondering, who are the cool people you've met like over the years? Like, I'm gonna put you on the spot now, Adrian, but like, you've met some really amazing people who do some amazing food and have some really cool stories. Like who pops in your mind when I say like who's the cool people we need to know about?
So definitely, I would say one of the more interesting guys right now is definitely Rodney Scott from Hemingway, South Carolina. Yep. Doing really interesting things. I had the spot in Charleston, South Carolina, and now Atlanta, Birmingham. Mm-hmm. I think, one of the questions I've always asked is, why hasn't there ever been a national barbecue chain owned by African Americans? That's just never happened. And really, have we really had a national barbecue chain? I guess
I don't think so.
Yeah, there's more regional success, I think.
There's some regional ones I know in Florida we've got some regional ones that are kind of like Florida plays on Texas Q, but they're not black barbecues. Rodney Scott's he's got a store, he's got a restaurant in Miami, I think now.
Oh yeah. Okay. So he's got a great story. He's got some backing. So I think if anybody has a chance, it's him.
Yeah.
Brian and Ed Mitchell are really interesting. So Ed Mitchell is a longtime black barbecue guy out of Wilson, North Carolina. And for most of these barbecue stories, you've got somebody who's been doing it for a long time. They're towards the end of their career. They'd like to pass it on to somebody in the family, but nobody in the family is interested, because making barbecue the old school way is just hard work. This is a different trajectory, because Ryan was in corporate finance, but at some point he realized what his father had accomplished and wanted to carry on that legacy. So he's now working with his father to create a line of products, open a restaurant, all that kind of stuff. So that's cool, because there's so many other stories where, there are people who are just like, they got to call it quits because nobody wants to take it on.
Sure. Yeah. I saw a thing the other day saying like Texas barbecue restaurants are having a hard time like staying open right now, and they're having a hard time finding places to sell them. The costs are expensive, right, Adrian?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then that's happening with black-owned restaurants too. So the Jones sisters in Kansas City, Kansas, Deborah and Mary Jones, I think they're ready to sell their business, but they're having a hard time selling it. And for those who don't know, they were kind of made famous by, they were on Queer Eye in 2019. Two nice women. They make an amazing sausage, man, but only open on Saturday mornings. For a while, it no longer operates. For a while, they had a barbecue vending machine, so you can get your barbecue on.
What?
24/7. Yeah, they would just have sandwiches and barbecue sauce in the machine.
No, that sounds just. I mean, I would like absolutely bankrupt myself, I think, if it were that good.
Yeah.
I want to give you some lightning round questions. We're going to come around to some ideas here. Best regional style, Adrian. I think we know which way you're going to go on this and why.
Kansas City.
Okay, you're absolutely wrong. Kansas City, like. Really, it's so ketchup based. I just feel it's so much sauce.
But it's so good. It is so good.
I just thought of a place in Kansas City. Arthur Bryant's.
Arthur Bryant's, that's one of the famous places.
Yeah.
Gates is also famous. The place that I like, which the locals know about, is a place called LC's. Yeah. That's the place that locals know, and it's very good.
Okay. Sauce or no sauce?
Definitely sauce.
Okay, what do you like?
My favorite commercial barbecue sauce is Gates Barbecue out of Kansas City.
Okay.
I just like the flavor. I just think it's really good. But I gotta tell you, I'm just liking these mustard-based sauces. more and more. There was a brand that I had, but it was a what do you call it? It was artisanal. It was something small, so you wouldn't know the name of it.
Okay.
But I don't know. Had you ever gone to Jenkins Quality Barbecue in Jacksonville? They just closed. Had you ever been to that spot?
No, I never got to go there. Though I can tell you, in Florida, my favorite barbecue place is in a gas station. It's called Pearl's Country Store. It's outside this. It's in this little town called Micanopy, Florida, about 20 minutes away from Gainesville. I was actually writing my dissertation on there's a whole bunch of cattle for I was writing my dissertation on there, and the people out there were like, "You got to go to Pearl's." I was like, "Okay," and I went, and it changed me, Adrian. It was just to me, it was amazing. But it's I often find the best places. I was at a conference with my friend Crystal and Shefflin. We in Tallahassee a couple years ago, and we just got in the truck and just drove around, and we saw some dude with a smoker on the side of the road, and we're like, this is where we're stopping. Those are the guys I trust,
Yeah.
That's where I'll see places that offer barbecue, and then I won't smell smoke. I'm like, are you baking your ribs? Is that what the heresy is going on? Because I can't do that. If I don't smell smoke as I'm walking in, I'm out of there.
Okay, here's why you need to let go of that test.
Oh, no.
Because this is what people are doing.
Okay.
There are a lot of people that cook with gas.
Yeah.
They set a little wood on fire for dudes like you. So they're faking the fun because they know that the people are waiting to smell that smoke.
Yeah, I'm looking for a big puff of smoke. I want a big offset cooker out there somewhere, or a pit, right? Somewhere if you're doing like a whole hog. But I can't find whole hog out here in Colorado. At least I haven't found it.
No, there's nobody doing whole hog here. There is smoke in the source at Brighton Boulevard. Every once in a while, he'll do a whole hog, but it'll usually be an event. So I think one time he actually brought Rodney Scott out here for an event where they did whole hog, but nobody's doing it. There was a place that was doing good, very good pork shoulder, Carolina pork shoulder, but it closed down. So
if we do whole hog, I'm grabbing the ears off that pig so fast. That's what I'm going for. I want those ears. I was at a wedding a few years ago. They did a whole hog. I was like, save me an ear. That is, to me, that's the single best piece. I love pig ears on that.
Right, I'm gonna have to disagree. I think it's the
really.
Pigtail.
Oh yeah. I've never had pigtail. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's just fatty and yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's what you want to be.
All right. This is for our friend Mark Johnson. Alabama white sauce. Delicious or abomination?
I like it on chicken. I don't put it on anything else, but I do like it on chicken. I had an attitude about it, but I said, let me just try it. I like it on chicken.
Okay. I'm going to stand by my argument here. It says mayonnaise has no place anywhere near any of my barbecue. And it won't be in my house. And certainly will not be on my meats. Whole hog or brisket?
I like whole hog. And here's why. Whole hog, both involve artistry. But man, to cook a whole hog, that is a real challenge because you've got different cuts of meat cooking at different rates. So to figure out how to do that well, it's an homage to the chef.
Yeah.
And so I like it. And plus I just get to get all these different, brisket is good, but it's kind of one note, right? Maybe two notes, lean versus the fatty. But whole hog, man, you got so much going on and it's just deliciousness.
I'm a Southerner. Pork is always going to be king for me. I respect brisket because it's hard to do. Because it's so hard to do well, and I like it when I get. But frankly, I think it's too fatty for me. It's just not a thing I get excited about. I have a Traeger, Adrian, sitting outside my house that I used to smoke my ribs yesterday. What's your thoughts on pellet grills?
Yeah, I'm not mad at pellet grill makers. I mean, I know they get derided, especially on the competition scale. But for the home cook, I like the pellet grills because I think you can control the smoke. You can also create interesting flavors, like you could start out with your oak or your hickory, and then later you can add a different wood, and then you can finish with a fruit wood. So I think in terms of fire management and flavor, I'm not mad at pellet cookers at all.
What's your most overrated barbecue myth?
That barbecue should be unsauced.
Okay.
That's the thing because people are like, you're hiding something if you have sauce on it. I want to taste, okay, whatever. If you want to taste the meat, that's fine. But just understand that for a lot of people, the signature is the sauce.
Who's your most underrated black pitmaster in history? This is tough.
Oh. Well, I'm going to have to go with the guy in my book who I've kind of become his publicist. He's long gone. But this guy named Columbus B. Hill, from West Tennessee, by way of Missouri, gets to Denver in the 1870s, and he starts doing barbecues for thousands of people. 1890, when the cornerstone for our state capitol was laid in Colorado, he did a barbecue for 25,000 people, and was doing barbecues on the regular for all these people. So through my efforts, I discovered him, fell in love with him, got him into the Barbecue Hall of Fame. And I found his unmarked grave, and so I raised the money, and I got him a headstone and had a ceremony for him, a homegoing ceremony for him, so that people just know who he is.
What's a barbecue hill you'll die on?
Okay, I mentioned sauce too much, so let me just lay on that one too much. That barbecue Cornish hen is a majestic expression of barbecue. And the only place you can get this, as far as I know, is at the Cozy Corner restaurant in Memphis, Tennessee. They're the ones who make it. I thought it was the weirdest thing when I heard about it, but man, it is so spectacular.
Have you been to Owensboro?
I have not yet. I need to go.
They got the whole mutton thing, but I'm kind of over it. Like, it's fine. But I'm like, it's fine. Like, as a Kentuckian, I gotta but realistically, I'm a West Tennessee guy. At the end of the day, my hometown is 20 minutes away from the Tennessee border.
So let me just ask you something though.
Yeah.
Is the mutton, is it smoked? Does it have a smoked flavor?
Yeah, it does. It does, and it's good, right? And frankly, Adrian, some of my my favorite memory of my late dad was I would go to his house, right? And he lived in this little town called Uniontown, Kentucky. It was on the Ohio River. And he had this big offset smoker. And he would cook. And my father was a big hunter, right? So he would smoke the stuff he hunted, right? Rabbit, venison, and a lot of lamb, actually. He didn't hunt lamb, but he'd pick it up. It was so good. Smoked rabbit is amazing. I was telling Heather Richardson the other day, squirrel is awesome. So I don't know if anyone's got thoughts on smoked squirrel, but I'm down for it. I'll throw down. You've eaten all over the country. What are the 5 barbecue restaurants in the United States we need to eat at outside of Colorado? Because we'll keep that separate.
Outside of Colorado.
Yes,
okay.
We'll do a separate one. We'll do a separate one for Colorado.
Yeah. So I just think you really need to go to Rodney Scott's place, one of his places, but the one I went to was in Charleston.
Yep.
Just to have a true whole hog experience, I think it's pretty slamming. I think people need to go to LC's in Kansas City for awesome, just kind of Kansas City barbecue. My favorite place in Texas, it goes back and forth, they're both in Houston, but Ray's or Burns in Houston, if you want a great expression of a kind of East Texas barbecue joint. Those are really, really good. I also like Bloodsoe's in LA. So he's a Texan that had a barbecue joint in Compton for a long time. But then ends up opening up in LA. Now it's in North Hollywood. But just really legit kind of stuff. And then Grabby's in Dudley, North Carolina, for a great expression of North Carolina barbecue. Those are the 5 places I would say. If you give me a 6th,
yeah, go for it.
I would, Little Red's in Seattle is a black-owned place that has a Caribbean influence because his wife is from the Caribbean. So that's really, really tasty. And then if I can have one more,
go for it.
There's a place called, I guess there's several places, but in Chicago, why am I blanking on the name of that? I was going to say Alice's. A1. Is it Honeycue? Is it Honeycue? I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's honey. I'm blanking on the name of it, but anyway, it's a great expression of Chicago barbecue. I was thinking about the soul food place named Alice's, so that's why.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I'm kind of kicking myself right now for not asking you before I went to Seattle, because I wasn't thinking about Seattle as a barbecue place, because I totally would have gone. Like, for the longest time when I would go on the road to do whatever, it's always stop and eat barbecue at some different place. That's what I want to try. But, you mentioned these places, Adrian. Are you seeing like these great barbecue places, like say outside of Kansas City, outside Memphis, outside North Carolina, right? Are you seeing like the places in like Seattle or in LA or whatever? Are they places with ties to these places where it's like usually a guy moved from Texas instead of like springing up organically? Is it like somebody is there like a barbecue diaspora is my question.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So usually these are Southerners. There's a tie to someplace in the South, and the person left the South and set up shop someplace else. So most of these guys are from Texas or someplace in the deep South.
Okay.
Like Georgia, Mississippi, someplace like that. You don't see a lot of North Carolina places outside of North Carolina. And I think that's a prejudice towards vinegar flavored barbecue. Because a lot of people once you get outside North Carolina, they're not really making North Carolina barbecue, I think, in an authentic way. I think they're making their barbecue any way they want. And then they're just adding vinegar as a condiment at the end. And that's not how it is, because for true North Carolina barbecue, you're adding that vinegar sauce throughout the cooking process. So it gives it an amazing depth of flavor. And so I think a lot of people are just faking the funk when it comes to true North Carolina barbecue. And a lot of people have an attitude of it because they're not getting a good version of it.
Is that mop that I'm thinking of? Is that yep. What you're talking about, that technique?
Yep.
All right. I have not been kind to Colorado cuisine since I have arrived here in 2023. You know this. If someone were going to come to the great state of Colorado, Adrian, and say, wow, I want some barbecue, where do they go?
I think we got a lot of good spots, man.
All right.
So
you've been holding out on me, so let's hear it.
Yeah, so here's my favorite ones. I really like a place called Pit Fiend. And so just to give you some lineage.
Okay, go for it.
The predecessor to Pit Fiend was a barbecue joint run by a guy who worked at Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
I think most people would say that they have the best brisket in Denver. I also like a place called Roaming Buffalo Barbecue, because Roaming Buffalo has bison and lamb on the menu, which I think is Colorado barbecue. So these aren't, these aren't things you're going to see everywhere. And then I also like a place called Wings Smoke Shack in Superior. It's kind of in between Denver and Boulder. I think that's quite good. And then there's a black-owned place called Stew Boys on the very southwestern edge of the Denver metro area. And that's STU and then Boy, which I think is really, really good.
Yeah, I am. I'm very excited about this idea of Stew Boys, because it's like within shouting distance for me, like, on the south side of Denver.
Yeah.
I like this idea of bison.
Make sure you give them a call before you go.
Oh, for real?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Because they've got irregular hours right now, because part of the team is going through a health crisis, and so
okay,
they have irregular hours for right now. So just call them and make sure that they're open.
Okay, well, that's fair. I mean, but I was just saying, like, this idea of bison is part of like the Colorado, like that would be a really cool take on it. I wonder, like, you think bison's too, is it too lean for barbecue? Because you need some fat if you're going to cook it low and slow.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You got to know what you're doing when you do bison. So they roaming buffalo, they do bison ribs, and so there's just going to be more fat there. Not a lot more, but there's going to be some there. So they primarily do bison ribs, and then they do lamb shoulder for sandwiches and other things like that.
Okay, I can do this. There's two places I like that I go to. One is Front Range Barbecue in Old Colorado City. Have you been to that place yet?
I have. Yeah, I thought it was solid.
Yeah, it's by a couple of guys from Alabama. And then up in Woodland Park, there's a spot I like, but it's Roy's Crew, and they're Texas. They moved up here from Texas, but I think those are not black barbecue. Neither one of those are black barbecue spaces. But it's taken me a while because people are like, "Hey, do you want barbecue out here?" It's like, absolutely not. No, under no circumstances am I doing that to me. So I'm always looking for stuff. I found some good stuff in like Grand Junction last year when I was on a fire, and it was good. But again, another guy from Texas.
Oh, really? Do you remember the name of it?
I wrote a Substack post about it, actually. I'll send it to you.
Because I know they have, there was a chain called
Snook's Bottom. Snook's Bottom Barbecue is what it was called.
Oh, man. Okay. I got to remember that because I periodically go to Grand Junction.
Really nice guy. He operates a barbecue place out from behind like a car wash, which to me only validates it that much more. Right. I don't want barbecue in like these high-end places, Adrian. Like I see like online, like some guy in New York City and he's making a thing and there's like, it's a deconstructed thing with a piece of bread. And I kind of want things to be broken when I'm going to get my barbecue. You know, I want it to be, I don't know, worn down. I want it to be used, I guess is my thought. All right. Let me bring this back to a history question as we kind of come to the end here. We're talking a lot about America 250 this year, Adrian. And I'm kind of wondering what the history of like black barbecue says about the history of America.
Yeah, so I think it shows it's a manifestation of the idea of a collaborative process that involved many cultures. Mm-hmm. So to me, American barbecue is indigenous, European, and African all coming together in different ways to create something that's celebrated worldwide now. And of course, it's taken iterations. And so I think one of the things that's unfortunate is that now in our current age, we don't really understand those contributions from indigenous people in Africa. And I would say that is part of the challenge for the American 250 is to celebrate this nation, but then to understand, well, what's been the dynamic for the last couple of centuries and really then have a reckoning for that and then show contribution and appreciation to uncover this because the black influence on barbecue is so profound and pronounced that it's no longer appreciated and because it's just part of the taste now. And so the only thing I could think of right now as an analog would be popular music in America. Pretty much when somebody's doing pop music, they're singing in a black aesthetic. Maybe not successfully, but that's the influence, right? Everybody's trying to sound black when they're singing. And I think it's the same thing has happened with American food. But now that it's so mainstream, right? That's the way to sing the song that you don't even think about people trying to sound black. Mm-hmm. And we don't appreciate how much black cooking processes, the use of ingredients, flavoring, seasoning, all that kind of stuff. I don't think we appreciate how much that has affected the American palate over 2 centuries.
Wow, I love this. I keep thinking about, frankly, Adrian, the ties between barbecue and catfish. I think I've told you, like, this book I'm working on right now is kind of like a history of catfish, which we also see a lot in like black communities, right? It's like this thing is it's like this class thing, and I also feel like there is there a sense, Adrian, of like some sense of community between like between poor and working class whites and poor and working class blacks that do enjoy barbecue together. Do you get a sense that there's maybe some sense of like cultural appreciation that happens here, or is it a totally appropriation?
I think there's some sense in the. Let me just back up. So
Sure.
for a good chunk of our country, I think when you talk about barbecue, I think that their thought is that yeah, the best stuff is made by a black person, and that's definitely true before you get to the 1990s. And because when you talk to people in most cities, if they outside the South, if they've discovered barbecue, it was usually made by a black person, and they were usually going to a black owned restaurant for that. So I think that there was an appreciation of that. I think it's less so now just because of the shift away from the black aesthetic. But I'm kind of glad you brought this up because one of the biggest surprises from my research on the soul food book is that when I start doing a closer examination of American food and regional eating patterns and all these kind of things, I found out it's more about class and place than it is about race. So pretty much people of the same socioeconomic class, regardless of race, are pretty much eating the same food.
Yeah.
Now, race keeps them from eating it together, but they're pretty much eating the same food. And that was a surprise to me because I bought into this narrative that soul food was the food white people didn't want, was the white man's garbage, and we took that and made it delicious. So to find out that there's a whole bunch of white people that eat the same stuff, that upends the narrative, right? And then, yeah, so that was really eye opening to me. But I think in terms of barbecue, it's a generational shift. I think most people like 40 and over would probably say the first taste of barbecue they got was from an African American. I think if you're younger than 40, I don't think you're saying that. I think you might be saying, yeah, the first taste I got was somebody trying to do Central Texas barbecue.
Okay. Do you think that comes from that lack of like a national black barbecue chain or black barbecue voice, or is it just a result of like gentrification and like lack of racial mixing?
Oh, I think it's just a function of the media representations. I just think, unfortunately, the bulk of people who are trying to find out about barbecue, the arbiters of, the people, I shouldn't say arbiters, the people that were curating, where to go, who to follow, where to get the good stuff, they focused on white dudes. And you can see it even in the food writing of people in major cities. Like you would see articles in the 1990s written by food critics in major cities saying that a white guy opening a barbecue joint was the first taste of real barbecue that city has gotten. Even though you've had black people doing that for decades in that city. I mean, seriously, in some major cities, people were writing stuff like that. So, if you're new to barbecue, you don't know any better, and you read this, I mean, you're trusting this person has done their research and that they're giving you an accurate view of history, and that's not. So I think it's really several things. I think it's the lack of media attention. I think it's also the gentrification thing that you said. And in some cases, black expressions of barbecue have been gentrified and repackaged in a different way to lose its black roots. Like nobody thinks of rib tips as something that came out of the black food barbecue tradition. It's just a ubiquitous barbecue item now. So things like that are happening. And then the ultimate part is the shift away from the black aesthetic. And it has real implications for black-owned barbecue joints because you've been doing pork for decades, right? Somebody who's watching TV and reading certain publications, they think that barbecue is brisket. So if they walk into your restaurant and they ask for brisket, and that's not something you make, you have to make a choice as a restaurant owner, right? Do I just keep doing what I do, or do I start making brisket? And unfortunately, there have been people that transition to making brisket, but they don't really. Let me just put it this way: there's a lot of roast beef being made around the country that has slightly smoky flavor than true Texas brisket.
Can you settle one last debate for me? I have one of my best friends in the world. He's a great guy. He lives in Tallahassee. His name's Mike Bonfanti. When we first met, one of our first arguments was over the preference between pulled pork or chopped pork. And I won't tell you whose side is who. Adrian, should pork be pulled or chopped?
I just think it should be chopped. And here's why I like chopped pork. Because typically when I have chopped pork, there's a mix of the cuts, and so you get different textures. So you have some crunchy bits, and that I just love the varying texture. So I like a chop. And then also, when you go to a place and you get ordered chopped pork, man, you start hearing that chop, 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 chop. That's awesome, man. To
Get
hear
you
that.
excited.
That's the drum beat of barbecue. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's like the sound the fajitas make when they start rolling out. You get all excited.
Yeah.
All right. We've been talking about the past of barbecue for the last hour. We've been talking about your work. What comes next for you? Like, what are you working on now?
The next project I'm working on is on the history of Black street food vendors. So I want to show how they introduced foods from West Africa, the foods they embraced from other cultures, the things they made popular. But the really cool thing is between 1880 to 1930, people would listen to African Americans singing or rhyming to get customers' attention. And they put it down to sheet music. So I have 100 of these things from various cities. And so I want to create a multimedia project where I would celebrate a city and I would hire somebody from that city to sing the street cries, right? And then for the ones that I don't have sheet music for, I would get a local spoken word artist to bring life to those. And just go city by city.
Oh my gosh. I can't do the music thing, but can I be your research assistant for the tasting bit? I'm down for that. Like just hi, this is my Kentuckian with me. He's going to help out today. Just don't listen. He's fine. He's new here, dude. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about this book for so gosh darn long. I can't tell you how much I love this damn thing. It is so freaking good. I've bought this thing 6 times over to give to other people. It is just. Adrian, I think it's one of the most important books in my house. I love this thing so much. So it was really cool to talk to you again, my friend, about your work on this platform. Thank you I know you're insanely busy. So thank you so much for taking the time, man.
And I appreciate you, man. Thank you again for the love for the book. I appreciate the support. Good to talk to you again about all this interesting stuff. So good to chop it up with you.
Well, I like that. Chop it up. Thank you, buddy.
All right. Peace.
And that's a wrap here at Reckoning with Jason Herbert. Thank you so very much to my dear friend Adrian Miller for taking the time to come out and talk about this book. I have followed Adrian for years. He's been a great friend to me, and I'm so glad that he came back on the pod today. Expect more from him in the future because I just love the guy. Speaking of guys I love, let's talk about Fletcher Powell, our producer, who continues to make this show run. And, of course, all of you for continuing to listen, to share, and make this podcast and my Substack and everything else that we do here what it is. So thank you guys so very much. You guys are amazing. Stay tuned. We have so much more. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Ciao for now. Bye.